A small, overcrowded dinghy pitched violently against the waves in the Aegean Sea, carrying a family whose home had been reduced to rubble by a relentless civil war. The father clutched his children, the mother scanned the horizon for any sign of safety, and the teenager stared blankly, exhausted from days of perilous travel. For thousands like them, Europe represented both hope and uncertainty, a land of asylum, but also bureaucracy, borders, and complex social integration. That morning, news outlets across the continent would report another wave of arrivals, hundreds of refugees landing on the shores of Greece and Italy, each carrying stories of loss, survival, and an unyielding desire for stability. Governments scrambled to respond, NGOs mobilized volunteers, and local communities braced for the immediate humanitarian and long-term rehabilitation challenges that these new arrivals would bring. Europe, with its long history of migration and displacement, once again faced a test of coordination, compassion, and resilience. The challenge of rehabilitating refugees is not new to the continent. In the aftermath of World War II, Europe was awash with displaced persons, survivors of concentration camps, refugees fleeing the Soviet advance in Eastern Europe, and countless civilians uprooted by shifting borders and devastation. Entire cities had been leveled, economies crippled, and social structures torn apart. Governments, often operating in coalition with international organizations such as the United Nations Relief and Rehabilitation Administration, faced the monumental task of providing shelter, food, medical care, and legal recognition for millions. Camps were set up in former military barracks, schools, and temporary structures, offering immediate relief while authorities worked on long-term resettlement, vocational training, and education. These historical precedents shaped contemporary European approaches to refugee rehabilitation, blending emergency aid with structured integration policies aimed at restoring dignity, self-sufficiency, and societal cohesion. By the early 21st century, Europe's refugee landscape had shifted but remained complex. Conflicts in Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and parts of Africa, combined with political persecution and climate-driven displacement, created waves of migration that challenged both legal frameworks and social systems. Refugees arriving on European shores were immediately confronted with the need for food, shelter, medical attention, and registration. Countries like Greece and Italy, situated at key entry points, often faced overcrowded reception centers, shortages of supplies, and long delays in processing asylum claims. Volunteers and NGOs played a critical role, distributing essentials, coordinating medical care, and assisting families through bureaucratic procedures. In Northern Europe, nations such as Germany and Sweden, which had more robust infrastructure and pre-existing asylum programs, were able to provide more immediate housing, orientation, and integration support, though the sheer volume of arrivals still strained resources and tested public patience. Legal frameworks underpin the rehabilitation process in Europe, guiding how refugees are recognized, protected, and integrated. The 1951 Refugee Convention and its 1967 Protocol establish fundamental rights, including protection from forced return, access to basic services, and the right to work or study. Within the European Union, the Common European Asylum System aims to standardize procedures, ensuring minimum standards for housing, healthcare, and legal assistance across member states. While these policies offer a blueprint, practical implementation often varies due to political priorities, resource allocation, and societal attitudes toward migrants. For arriving refugees, legal recognition is the gateway to rehabilitation, determining access to education, healthcare, employment, and social services. Without it, individuals risk marginalization, poverty, and exploitation, highlighting the critical intersection of law, administration, and human dignity. Upon arrival, refugees confront immediate survival needs alongside the longer-term challenge of integration. Reception centers provide shelter and sustenance but are rarely designed for extended stays. Families live in crowded quarters, often with minimal privacy, and navigate the uncertainties of waiting for asylum decisions. Language barriers, cultural differences, and the trauma of displacement further complicate daily life. Psychosocial support, therefore, is as crucial as physical provisions. Refugees have endured war, persecution, and dangerous journeys, leaving many with post-traumatic stress, anxiety, and depression. European rehabilitation programs increasingly recognize the importance of counseling, peer support networks, and culturally sensitive therapy to help individuals regain agency, confidence, and a sense of belonging. Emotional recovery, in many ways, is as important as rebuilding physical stability, as both are essential for long-term integration. Education for children is another central pillar of rehabilitation. Young refugees often arrive having missed months or years of schooling, and language barriers add to the challenge of reintegration. European countries have developed specialized programs to bridge these gaps, offering accelerated learning, language immersion, and extracurricular activities to help children adjust academically and socially. Schools also provide a crucial environment for building community connections, developing routines, and fostering hope for the future. Adolescents, in particular, benefit from vocational training, apprenticeships, and mentorship initiatives, offering pathways to employment and a sense of purpose within their new communities. Investing in the education of young refugees is not only a moral imperative but also a strategic one, reducing long-term marginalization and contributing to the host society's social and economic vitality. Adults, meanwhile, require access to employment and vocational programs to achieve self-sufficiency. Language courses, skills assessments, recognition of foreign qualifications, and job placement initiatives help refugees enter labor markets. Germany, for example, has implemented comprehensive apprenticeship programs, linking displaced individuals to technical schools and employers, while Sweden emphasizes career counseling and rapid integration into local economies. Despite these efforts, challenges remain. Labor markets are competitive, language acquisition can take years, and cultural adaptation requires ongoing support. Successful rehabilitation, therefore, hinges on both opportunity and structured guidance, ensuring refugees can contribute meaningfully to society while regaining independence. Community engagement plays a vital role in facilitating rehabilitation. Host societies influence outcomes through public attitudes, acceptance, and support structures. Local communities, NGOs, and volunteer groups serve as intermediaries, providing mentorship, social orientation, and networks that connect refugees with essential services. Refugees themselves often form associations and support groups, fostering solidarity, cultural exchange, and advocacy. Positive community interactions enhance social cohesion, reduce isolation, and reinforce the sense that refugees are valued participants in society, not merely temporary recipients of aid. Europe's refugee rehabilitation process is inseparable from broader policy debates and political pressures. Public sentiment, migration policy, and funding priorities shape the effectiveness and scope of programs. The European Union has introduced mechanisms to redistribute responsibility, support integration programs, and provide financial assistance to member states bearing the brunt of arrivals. Nevertheless, disparities in implementation persist, creating uneven experiences for refugees depending on the country of arrival. Successful rehabilitation, therefore, requires a combination of legal protection, state support, and community engagement, all underpinned by political commitment and social willingness to embrace displaced populations. Ultimately, refugee rehabilitation in Europe is a continuous, multifaceted process. It begins with immediate survival, shelter, food, and legal recognition, but extends into long-term integration, encompassing education, employment, mental health, and community participation. Historical experience, from post-World War II displacement to modern crises in Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine, has shaped policies and practices, emphasizing both humanitarian obligations and strategic societal benefits. Proper rehabilitation transforms displacement from a state of vulnerability into an opportunity for rebuilding lives, fostering resilience, and contributing positively to host communities. Each arrival reminds Europe of the delicate balance between compassion, capacity, and coordination, a balance that defines the continent's ongoing challenge in responding to human displacement with dignity, foresight, and efficacy. Resettlement and the struggle for stability. As the sun rose over the sprawling reception center in northern Germany, new arrivals shuffled through the gates, clutching identification papers, backpacks, and the faint hope that life could begin anew. The facility buzzed with activity, volunteers handing out blankets, interpreters guiding families through registration, and social workers explaining the next steps in a language that was often foreign to both parties. Each person carried a unique story: a father who had watched his village burn, a mother who had spent months navigating borders with her children, a young man separated from his family and alone for the first time in years. Resettlement was not simply about providing housing, it was a complex orchestration of legal, social, and psychological support, designed to transform vulnerability into stability and displacement into possibility. Europe, facing the largest influx of refugees in decades, was now confronting the immense challenge of turning temporary relief into sustainable integration. The process of resettlement begins with legal recognition, a step that determines every subsequent opportunity. Asylum seekers must navigate a maze of paperwork, interviews, and background checks. While international law, including the 1951 Refugee Convention, guarantees protection and the right to work or study, the reality is far more complex. Each country interprets and implements these protections differently, creating a patchwork of experiences across the continent. In Germany, for instance, applicants are typically assigned a temporary residence status that allows access to medical care, language courses, and vocational programs, while awaiting a final decision. In contrast, some southern European nations, often overwhelmed by initial arrivals, struggle to provide timely processing, leaving refugees in limbo for months or even years. During this waiting period, the sense of uncertainty can weigh heavily, exacerbating trauma and complicating efforts to achieve emotional and social rehabilitation. Housing is one of the most immediate and visible challenges in resettlement. Reception centers, often designed as short-term facilities, quickly become crowded as arrivals surge. Families may share small rooms with strangers, children play in confined spaces, and the noise and confusion can make adaptation difficult. European governments have increasingly sought to transition refugees from temporary centers to permanent housing in urban or suburban communities, but this process is fraught with obstacles. Local opposition to the placement of refugees, bureaucratic delays, and housing shortages complicate efforts, forcing many families into prolonged stays in shelters. Despite these difficulties, housing represents more than a physical necessity. It is a symbolic anchor, a first step toward stability and belonging in a society that can feel distant and unfamiliar. Integration extends far beyond housing. Language acquisition is paramount, serving as a gateway to employment, education, and social interaction. Countries like Sweden have implemented intensive language programs that combine classroom instruction with practical immersion, while Germany has emphasized integration courses that blend language learning with cultural orientation and civic education. Mastery of the local language allows refugees to navigate daily life, build relationships, and participate in society meaningfully. It also provides a critical psychological boost, fostering independence and self-efficacy at a stage when many individuals feel powerless after years of displacement and uncertainty. Employment represents both a challenge and an opportunity. For adult refugees, gaining access to the labor market is essential for self-sufficiency and societal participation. However, barriers abound. Skills and qualifications earned in home countries are often unrecognized, job markets are competitive, and language proficiency may initially be limited. European governments and NGOs have responded with tailored programs, offering vocational training, certification recognition, apprenticeships, and job placement services. These initiatives aim not only to provide income but also to restore a sense of purpose and contribution. Employment helps reduce dependency on state support, fosters social connections, and accelerates the transition from survival to stability, yet the pathway is seldom linear or immediate. Psychosocial rehabilitation remains a cornerstone of resettlement, addressing the lingering effects of trauma, loss, and displacement. Many refugees arrive after witnessing or experiencing violence, persecution, or perilous journeys that leave deep psychological scars. European countries have increasingly integrated mental health services into resettlement programs, offering counseling, peer support groups, and culturally sensitive therapeutic interventions. Children, in particular, benefit from structured play, school integration, and extracurricular activities, all designed to restore routine, stability, and a sense of safety. Adult refugees often engage in group workshops, vocational guidance, and community-based programs that combine emotional support with practical skill development. Recognizing that recovery is both emotional and functional is crucial to achieving meaningful rehabilitation. Education plays a dual role in resettlement. It provides children with the knowledge they need to succeed and serves as a mechanism for social integration. Schools become safe spaces where displaced minors can build friendships, acquire language skills, and regain a sense of normalcy. Specialized programs accelerate learning for those who have missed months or years of schooling, while vocational training offers adolescents and adults pathways into skilled professions. In Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands, collaborative efforts between schools, community organizations, and government agencies ensure that education is both accessible and adaptable, tailored to the diverse needs of refugee populations. Success in education not only benefits the individual but also enhances societal cohesion, reducing the risk of marginalization and fostering long-term stability. Community engagement is equally vital. Refugees' experiences are profoundly shaped by the attitudes and support of host societies. Local volunteers, civil society organizations, and faith-based groups often bridge gaps between displaced populations and official institutions, providing mentorship, guidance, and opportunities for social interaction. Refugees themselves frequently organize cultural, educational, and advocacy groups, creating networks that offer mutual support and foster empowerment. These interactions reduce isolation, encourage active participation in community life, and promote understanding between newcomers and long-term residents. Integration is not imposed solely through policy, it emerges from human connections and shared effort, forming the social fabric necessary for lasting rehabilitation. Political, economic, and social factors shape the success of resettlement initiatives. Public opinion can either facilitate or hinder rehabilitation efforts, influencing government funding, resource allocation, and community support. European Union programs, such as relocation schemes and integration grants, aim to distribute responsibility and resources across member states, yet implementation remains uneven. Countries with higher political commitment and resource availability, such as Germany and Sweden, tend to provide more effective rehabilitation services, while nations struggling with economic constraints or social tensions face greater challenges. The complex interplay of policy, public perception, and institutional capacity underscores the difficulty of achieving consistent outcomes across a diverse continent. Ultimately, resettlement is the bridge between immediate survival and long-term integration. It encompasses housing, language acquisition, employment, education, psychosocial support, and community engagement, each element reinforcing the others. Effective programs recognize that refugees are not passive recipients of aid but active participants in rebuilding their lives. By investing in legal recognition, social services, and human capital, Europe transforms displacement from a crisis into an opportunity, creating conditions for refugees to regain agency, contribute to society, and pursue a future beyond survival. The story of resettlement is, in essence, a story of resilience, of individuals navigating uncertainty, of societies adapting to new challenges, and of the enduring human capacity to rebuild amidst adversity. Building a new life, integration challenges across Europe. The first snow of winter blanketed the small towns of Central Europe, settling on rooftops, streets, and the temporary shelters where newly arrived refugees were trying to find their footing. Children played cautiously in the cold, their laughter muffled by scarves, while parents navigated buses, appointments, and bureaucratic procedures, learning local systems that were unfamiliar and often confusing. Integration, many realized, was far more than survival. It required a delicate balance between adapting to a new society and preserving identity and dignity. For refugees arriving from Syria, Afghanistan, Iraq, and parts of Africa, the challenge was compounded by trauma, cultural differences, and the pressure of quickly learning languages, understanding local norms, and finding employment to support their families. Across Europe, governments, civil society, and local communities face the immense task of not just housing refugees but equipping them to thrive in societies that could sometimes feel distant or even hostile. One of the most immediate hurdles was language acquisition. In cities such as Berlin, Stockholm, and Amsterdam, classrooms filled with adults and children learning German, Swedish, or Dutch became hubs of hope and frustration. While intensive language programs offered structured instruction, many refugees struggled to master the nuances required for professional life or academic success. Adults often attended evening courses after long days of childcare, registration, and navigating public services, while children were enrolled in mainstream schools that demanded rapid adaptation. Language was not only a practical necessity but a symbolic key to participation in society, influencing employment prospects, social inclusion, and confidence. Those who struggled faced isolation, dependence, and slower integration, highlighting the critical importance of accessible, high-quality language programs. Education for refugee children presented a separate but equally complex set of challenges. Many arrived having missed months or years of schooling due to war, displacement, or dangerous journeys. Schools had to accommodate not only gaps in learning but also emotional trauma, cultural adjustment, and language barriers. In countries like Germany and Sweden, special programs were developed to provide accelerated learning, language immersion, and extracurricular support. Teachers were trained in trauma-informed pedagogy, and peer mentoring programs connected refugee children with local students to foster social bonds. Success in education required careful coordination, patience, and flexibility, acknowledging that academic achievement alone was insufficient. social integration and emotional stability were equally essential. For adults, employment was both a practical necessity and a symbol of restored agency. Entering European labor markets often required recognition of foreign qualifications, vocational retraining, or apprenticeships. Governments and NGOs worked to connect refugees with programs that matched their skills with market needs, offering mentorship and job placement services. In Sweden, tailored employment initiatives focused on matching refugees with labor shortages in sectors like healthcare and technology, while Germany invested heavily in apprenticeship programs linking young refugees to skilled trades. Yet barriers remained: bureaucratic delays, language requirements, and societal biases frequently slowed progress. For many, the struggle to find employment became a test of resilience, forcing individuals to navigate systemic complexities while managing the pressures of family life, legal requirements, and cultural adaptation. Housing and urban integration further complicated the rehabilitation process. Refugees transitioning from temporary reception centers to permanent accommodation often encountered local resistance, limited availability, or bureaucratic obstacles. Municipalities, especially in smaller towns, faced tensions between supporting newcomers and addressing concerns of long-term residents. Successful integration depended not only on physical housing but also on access to community resources, social networks, and public services. Programs that paired refugees with mentors, community volunteers, or local families helped bridge these gaps, fostering relationships that eased cultural adjustment and created a sense of belonging. Without such connections, even adequate housing could feel isolating and temporary. Social and cultural integration posed additional challenges. Refugees frequently had to reconcile their cultural identities with the expectations and norms of their host societies. Differences in gender roles, religious practices, and daily routines sometimes created misunderstandings or tension. Community centers, intercultural workshops, and cultural exchange programs emerged as critical spaces where dialogue, mutual understanding, and respect could flourish. These initiatives allowed refugees to maintain aspects of their heritage while learning about local customs, creating a hybrid identity that facilitated acceptance and participation. Successful integration, it became clear, required more than compliance with rules. It demanded empathy, dialogue, and a commitment from both refugees and host communities to navigate differences collaboratively. The role of civil society and local volunteers proved indispensable in this phase of rehabilitation. Across Europe, NGOs, faith-based organizations, and grassroots movements provided tutoring, mentorship, language classes, and legal assistance. Volunteers accompanied refugees to hospitals, schools, and government offices, helping them understand complex systems. Community initiatives often filled gaps left by limited government resources, particularly in smaller towns or regions experiencing sudden influxes. In many cases, refugees themselves became active contributors to these programs, organizing cultural events, providing peer support, or advocating for policy improvements. This reciprocal engagement strengthened social cohesion, creating networks of trust and mutual aid that facilitated long-term integration. Political and societal attitudes also shaped outcomes. Rising nationalism, xenophobia, and anti-immigrant sentiment in some countries created obstacles to smooth integration, influencing public services, employment opportunities, and community support. Governments had to navigate delicate balances between upholding humanitarian obligations, maintaining social cohesion, and responding to domestic political pressures. The European Union attempted to standardize integration policies through funding mechanisms, relocation programs, and legal frameworks, but implementation remained uneven. the success of rehabilitation depended as much on societal acceptance as on institutional capacity, highlighting that integration is a two-way process requiring openness, dialogue, and compromise. Health and psychosocial support remains central to long-term rehabilitation. Many refugees arrived with untreated medical conditions, chronic illnesses, or mental health challenges stemming from trauma and displacement. Access to healthcare systems, counseling, and peer support programs was essential to ensure refugees could participate fully in education, employment, and community life. Special attention was given to children and adolescents, who were particularly vulnerable to the psychological effects of displacement. By integrating mental health services into schools, community centers, and vocational programs, European countries sought to address both visible and invisible scars, recognizing that rehabilitation is as much about healing the mind as providing material resources. Ultimately, integration in Europe is an ongoing negotiation between resilience, opportunity, and societal cooperation. Refugees must navigate legal, economic, educational, and cultural landscapes while host societies adjust to the presence of new populations. Programs that succeed combine structured support with flexibility, recognizing that each refugee's journey is unique. Housing, education, employment, language acquisition, community engagement, and psychosocial care intersect to create pathways toward autonomy, dignity, and belonging. Where these elements align, refugees rebuild lives, contribute to the economy, and enrich cultural diversity. Where gaps persist, individuals face prolonged marginalization, frustration, and uncertainty, illustrating the stakes of effective rehabilitation. By the time spring arrives, the first signs of progress are evident. Children attend school confidently, families find steady employment, and community centers buzz with intercultural activities. The early months of uncertainty give way to routines, relationships, and a fragile but growing sense of home. Integration is not immediate, and challenges remain, but the process of rehabilitation demonstrates human adaptability, resilience, and the capacity for societies to accommodate and empower displaced populations. Europe's experience underscores that rehabilitation is not merely a response to crisis, it is a long-term investment in social stability, human dignity, and the transformative potential of welcoming those who have endured unimaginable hardship. Looking forward, long-term impact and the future of refugee rehabilitation in Europe. Spring sunlight filtered through the windows of a community center in Lyon, where refugees and locals gathered for a cultural festival. Laughter, music, and the aroma of shared meals filled the room, signaling progress in what had once been a tense process of adaptation. For many refugees, months, or even years of struggle had brought them to a point where survival was no longer the only goal. Now, the focus was on building meaningful lives, contributing to society, and planning for the future. Across Europe, these moments of stability, however small, reflected the culmination of complex processes that combined immediate relief, structured integration, and long-term policy planning. Rehabilitation had become more than a humanitarian response, it was now a societal project, shaping both the lives of refugees and the communities that welcomed them. Long-term impact begins with the recognition that rehabilitation is not a finite event but an ongoing journey. Initial reception, language training, and legal processing are only the first stages. The subsequent years determine whether refugees achieve self-sufficiency, social inclusion, and psychological stability. In cities such as Berlin, Malmö, and Amsterdam, longitudinal programs track educational attainment, employment, housing stability, and community engagement to evaluate integration outcomes. These assessments reveal patterns. Refugees who access high-quality language programs and vocational training early are more likely to secure employment, participate in social networks, and experience improved mental health. Conversely, prolonged periods in temporary shelters or under bureaucratic uncertainty correlate with lower integration rates and increased social marginalization. Policymakers have increasingly relied on such data to refine programs, emphasizing preventative measures rather than reactive solutions. Employment remains a key indicator of long-term success. Refugees who secure stable jobs not only gain financial independence but also build social connections, develop local knowledge, and contribute to economic growth. Programs in Germany, Sweden, and the Netherlands provide apprenticeship opportunities, recognition of foreign credentials, and career counseling to help individuals match skills to labor market needs. Success stories abound: engineers from Syria leading infrastructure projects, teachers from Afghanistan mentoring students, and young professionals from Eritrea starting small businesses that employ local workers. These achievements demonstrate the transformative power of rehabilitation when policy, education, and opportunity converge. At the same time, they highlight persistent challenges, including systemic bias, language barriers, and unequal access to high-quality training, which policymakers continue to address. Education and skill development have effects that extend across generations. Refugee children who complete primary and secondary schooling, participate in extracurricular programs, and access higher education are more likely to become active, productive citizens. Vocational training and apprenticeships provide pathways into skilled professions, while adult education programs help parents navigate employment, healthcare, and civic life. Social mobility, once interrupted by displacement, can be restored when education is coupled with supportive networks and inclusive policies. Importantly, long-term rehabilitation emphasizes not only the individual's advancement but also the broader societal benefits, as educated, skilled refugees contribute to the economy, cultural diversity, and civic engagement of their host countries. Community participation and social cohesion are central to sustainable rehabilitation. Refugees who feel included in local life through volunteering, community organizations, cultural exchanges, or neighborhood initiatives report higher levels of well-being, reduced isolation, and a stronger sense of belonging. Host communities, in turn, benefit from increased cultural understanding, civic engagement, and economic participation. Cities like Lyon, Vienna, and Stockholm have developed innovative programs to foster interaction between refugees and long-term residents, including mentorship schemes, intercultural workshops, and collaborative public projects. These initiatives demonstrate that rehabilitation is a two-way process. Refugees adapt to their environment, but societies must also adapt to accommodate new members with empathy, flexibility, and foresight. Mental health and psychosocial support remain crucial for long-term outcomes. Refugees who arrive with trauma, anxiety, or depression require sustained access to counseling, peer networks, and culturally sensitive services. Children exposed to conflict or displacement particularly benefit from continuity in schooling, structured social interaction, and safe spaces for expression. Over time, mental health support enables refugees to participate fully in education, employment, and community life, reinforcing other aspects of rehabilitation. European policymakers have increasingly recognized that neglecting psychological recovery undermines long-term success, prompting investments in integrated mental health services as part of broader rehabilitation programs. The political landscape significantly shapes the future of refugee rehabilitation. Rising nationalism, anti-immigrant sentiment, and policy shifts can influence access to housing, education, and employment. At the same time, supportive legislation, funding mechanisms, and European Union coordination create frameworks for consistent and equitable rehabilitation across member states. The CEA's system, along with EU-funded integration projects, attempts to harmonize reception standards and support programs, yet disparities remain. Countries with stronger political commitment, stable economies, and established infrastructures tend to provide more effective long-term support, while others face challenges in scaling programs. Policymakers must therefore balance national priorities with humanitarian obligations, recognizing that long-term integration benefits not only refugees but the social and economic health of host countries. Lessons learned from past crises inform future approaches. The post-World War II rehabilitation of displaced Europeans, combined with more recent waves from Syria, Afghanistan, and Ukraine, demonstrates that successful integration relies on early intervention, coordinated policy, and community engagement. Timely legal recognition, rapid access to education and employment, and structured psychosocial support reduce long-term dependency and social tension. Equally important is the engagement of refugees themselves as active participants in rebuilding their lives and contributing to local communities. Grassroots initiatives, cultural programs, and peer support networks empower individuals while strengthening social cohesion, proving that rehabilitation is most effective when it combines top-down policy with bottom-up participation. Economic integration, while challenging, offers tangible benefits for both refugees and host societies. Studies have shown that refugees who enter the labor market quickly contribute to tax revenues, fill labor shortages, and stimulate entrepreneurship. Small business development among refugees, particularly in urban centers, has led to job creation, service expansion, and cross-cultural exchange. Governments increasingly recognize that investment in education, training, and employment programs is not only a moral imperative but also a strategic economic decision. By treating rehabilitation as an investment rather than a short-term expenditure, European countries aim to transform the refugee challenge into an opportunity for social and economic growth. Looking forward, technology and innovation are shaping new avenues for rehabilitation. Digital platforms facilitate language learning, vocational training, legal guidance, and mental health support, reaching displaced populations more efficiently and effectively. Online mentoring programs connect refugees with professionals across Europe, while virtual classrooms and e-learning platforms overcome geographic and logistical barriers. These tools complement traditional in-person programs, enabling continuous support, personalized learning, and broader access to resources. Technology, when paired with community engagement and policy support, represents a critical lever in scaling rehabilitation and ensuring long-term success. Ultimately, the story of refugee rehabilitation in Europe is one of resilience, adaptation, and transformation. Individuals who arrive after harrowing journeys gradually rebuild their lives through legal recognition, education, employment, community participation, and psychosocial support. Societies, in turn, adapt to accommodate newcomers, learning to balance resources, cultural diversity, and social cohesion. The long-term impact extends beyond individual survival, it strengthens economies, enriches cultural landscapes, and demonstrates the enduring value of compassion and strategic planning. As Europe continues to face new waves of displacement, these lessons rooted in history, evidence, and human experience will guide the continent in creating rehabilitation systems that are sustainable, inclusive, and transformative for generations to come.